Um, Next, let's go to Stephanie.
Hi, everybody. I'm Stephanie Quinn, and my multi-genre story, I realized when I got the last minute notice to come here today, begins and ends in Asheville, which is kind of interesting. I live in Asheville. I've been here about 6 years, and I sometimes play in the symphony, as we were hearing from Rosalind, in a similar type of basis. I'm always thrilled to come because it's just 10 minutes away, and love playing with the group. It's such a happy atmosphere, which is a big change from the big cities that I've lived in the past. I spend a lot of my time teaching and performing, and I've been doing a lot of cross genre work with the quartet and trio, and many times I have to arrange, let's say, a pop cover or a country western song and arrange it for quartet or trio. So I do a good amount of different genres that way. And of course, with a name like Quinn, I know about 200 Celtic Irish Irish fiddle songs. So I also enjoy doing that. I was also spent some time in Israel and Egypt, and that Middle Eastern certainly had an influence on me as well as with my compositions. I'm also a composer.
Oh, wow. Quite an affluent musician. Wonderful. Thanks, Stephanie. I have a feeling that Celtic music is going to be a little bit of a theme this evening. So, the first question that I want to ask everybody, and you all can answer in whatever order and let the conversation go. But how did you really just start to get into music? Kind of what were the things that inspired you? I know myself as a musician, there's obviously like very specific things that I can think of in my childhood, for example, that impacted what type of music I was interested in, what music, instruments, etc., and kind of what drove me to become a musician. And I just kind of want to hear that story from some of you as the foundation for obviously what we're going to get into as the talk goes on. Anybody? Am I going to call on somebody?
We all know how to read rests in music.
Yes.
The rest. We're waiting for someone else to enter.
I'll jump in. As a child, I was fascinated with sounds. And my mother would drive me in the car, and I'd look at the telephone wires, and I was taking music lessons at a young age. I'd look at the telephone wires, and I'd imagine the birds were musical notes on there, and I could hear all those notes because they had pitch. Wow. And I was playing around with that. I was also very much into time. And I had my schedule from the time I was about fourth grade incremented in 15-minute time slots and so forth. So when my teacher said practice 3 hours a day, I knew exactly how I was going to get it all done.
Oh, I'm sure that was very productive.
But by the way, I'm a violinist. I'm a violinist and a pianist. So that's 3 hours between the two instruments.
Oh, wow. That does seem to be a thing, a trend, I would say, between musicians is some obsession with time, some understanding of that, with the fact that our art is something that comes and goes with time. It's not something that's permanent. You know what I mean? So thanks, Stephanie. Just kind of talk to me a little bit about what that transition was like for you. I know a lot of you mentioned that you do dabble in other genres and kind of more what we'd even say experimental music. I know you do, Emmalee. And just kind of what drew you to that? What kind of for you was like, I need to go in a different direction here, or explore something different? Or was that always a part of it? Was that there from the very beginning of playing music?
I guess I'll jump in.
Yeah, okay.
On that. For me, I was introduced to genre mixing in New York through my association with Paul Winter. He taught me how to improvise. And that was a gateway to many, many explorations. And he was mixing species as he invited the humpback whales and coyote or eagles and wolves into his music. So all of that really blew my mind, and I got very interested in it. And then around that time, I went to Israel to bring Palestinians and Jews together in my workshops using common tones. I found some commonality between it. And while I was there, I'd be invited to go out and play with a Jewish band And then when I was finished for the night, I'd say, would any of you like to play music with a Palestinian band?
Wow.
And I'd grab those numbers, and then I'd go to that side and vice versa. So every time I went out, I was either doing Arabic music or Hebrew music, and they are quite different.
Mm.
So then I went back to New York, and then it was Philip Glass, it was Dharma Bums, all kinds of music. And then by the time I got to Egypt, I was just full of ideas. So that's kind of how it started with me. I think some of what I was doing might be classified as world music.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What drew you to that culture, to that part of the world?
What?
I said, what drew you to that part of the world? What kind of drew you to
Well, it's
pursue
two
that?
things. Two things. The Field Museum in Chicago has a mummy, and every time I went there, I'd run to the basement to see the mummy. So I was fascinated with Egyptian.
Mm.
And as a child, I thought I looked Egyptian, even though I had light skin. I would look in the mirror and go, "Who's that?" It's just kind of strange. But the Israel thing was, I started working with tones and toning and overtone singing,
Mm-hmm.
and I had this idea to bring people together this way, and I was doing workshops in this, song circles. And then I scratched my head and said, who hates each other more than anybody? Where's the biggest conflict? Let's go and try this out. Let's try this out. And that's why I went to Israel. And I went back several times, and the Egypt, I don't want to take up too much time, but the
No, no, that's beautiful.
the Egypt came as a result of that, and then by chance I wound up inside the Great Pyramid by myself.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is really beautiful. I'm just like glad um that theme came up about that commonality that we all can share, and that music can bring so many people together that um, maybe have complete differences or even hatred between them. So
Well,
I definitely want to talk about that a little bit more. I think that's beautiful.
that's
Um,
the theme of the album. It's all about people that coming from different places coming together and finding that commonality. That's the whole theme of it.
Wonderful. And I'll get to this at the end, but and I didn't mention at the beginning, um, but for those of you on the call today that would like to hear any more of what the musicians are talking about this evening, I'll leave my email in the chat so that you can reach out to me and I can connect you with them. I'm sure that many of our viewers would love to hear that album or hear some of this music that we're all kind of talking about. So we'll get to that at the end. To address the elephant in the room like I do for all of these, and that is we're all at home, we're all dealing with these crazy times, and as musicians, obviously this time has affected everybody quite a bit. Obviously not, we're not on the stage right now and not in a concert hall, but I am sure that that does not mean that creativity has gone down at all. So I'd love to just hear kind of what you all have been up to since this whole thing began last March. If this has given you any time to kind of delve into things that maybe you didn't do before, or didn't have time to do before, or just kind of what that time's been like, and maybe shed some positive light on this whole thing, if that's possible. So, anybody who wants to start? We want to start with you, Stephanie? Is that okay?
Um, well, my mom passed away, in the beginning of this, so
Oh,
I think
Stephanie.
I think that my experience is uniquely different. I just sort of went into a vacuum for a few weeks, so I can't say I would say my creativity exploded in the garden,
Mm.
and I dug and dug and dug all this. And I think Emilee's been over a couple times. It's like hardly any grass left, and I planted all these pollinator things and put a bat house up, and then these butterflies and raising monarchs, and planted lots of food, and I just completely exploded with it. Over 110 uh, plants, and each
Oh my
one of
gosh.
them I thought a zucchini plant would give me one zucchini. No, 10 or 15. So
You got a food forest going.
That happened. That's what happened to me. I think it was very therapeutic. And then after that, I decided, one of my students was saying, you do these monthly master classes. Why don't you do them twice a month? And I said, oh my gosh. And then they volunteered to host it. So I've been doing that since June, twice a month. So I give a class and people perform and they wind up on YouTube. They're called tutorials. And we talk about music and the meaning of music. And I'm encouraging my students and teaching them how to project their emotions through cyberspace. I think it's really important that I thought it would take advantage of this, and maybe it's a creative idea about, when we perform and there's a room full of beating hearts out there, it's very different than when you're like here, in this kind of a situation, for example. And one of the times I was talking to them about loving, about it being about love, that we have to love the music we're playing, we have to love the composer, learn about them just like we would a best friend, like we would love a best friend. But most importantly, we must love our audience. So I tried it out one time, and instead of thinking of loving the people that were at the Zoom class, I was thinking it was a tough time in our history here in America, and I was thinking about, well, we know there's some bad stuff going on, around the world, but I decided I'm going to think about all the goodness. There's so many more good people and wonderful people. And so I kind of experiment with the idea of really focusing on my love for humanity and putting in my music that way. So been exploring things like that in artistic listening, teaching people how to listen to music, not critically, but artistically and with our feelings and emotions. So that's kind of
That's definitely a positive. I'm so sorry that it started out as a very negative time, difficult time, and but that's absolutely beautiful. And I think that what you share is a sentiment I keep trying to remind myself of is, as humans, we're definitely going to make up for all this time that we're at home. And I think by the time we finally all get to gather in a concert hall or wherever that space is and get to hear and perform together again, it will be so appreciated and loved. And we'll finally get to know just really how important that is. Whereas before, maybe. So I think that's absolutely lovely. And if you wouldn't mind, Stephanie, either emailing me or putting in the chat the name of what you were just talking about. That's on. You said it's on YouTube. Is that correct?
It's really easy. You just go on just YouTube, Amazon. My name's Stephanie Quinn, Asheville, and it'll come up there. Or my name, Amazon Music, Violin, Violinist.
Okay.
It's pretty easy to. You can just do Stephanie Quinn, Asheville, Amazon. Everybody can remember that. But I'll put it in there if you like.
Okay, thanks, Stephanie. I know people would love to check that out.
This is what it looks like. That's the Sphinx, and that's me in front of the Sphinx right before I recorded.
Oh, wow.
All right.
All right.
And my partner, Ben, has a recording studio in our house. So luckily I was able to just be here and record with him. And yeah, so that's out online on Bandcamp, and I'll share a link to that. And then the other major project that I've been working on has been this microtonal music that I talked about earlier. So my partner, in addition to being doing recording for folks, he also is a composer. So Ben Kurtman, I would definitely recommend looking him up and listening to some of his music. So he wrote this sort of series of songs, 7 songs, all in different just intonation tunings of his own design. So it's been really awesome for me to learn from him, what are these different tunings, how to sing different microtonal notes, how to play different microtonal notes on my cello. And if you all aren't familiar with just intonation, so we as Western musicians play most everything is equal tempered, so an equal temperament. So we play with just 12 notes. But if you think about an artist, they have all these colors that they can choose from. And what if an artist only had 12 colors to choose from? So you can think about just intonation, microtonality as really expanding the color palette of sound, of tones. And just intonation specifically is based on the harmonic series, or based on the way that strings and sound work. So if you cut a string in half, or if you play the harmonic at the halfway point of a string, it sounds a certain frequency. And then you divide the string up into these different fractions, and there are different tones that sound, and some of them sound different from an equal tempered note. So that's, just kind of a very brief what is just intonation. So it's been really cool for me to learn all that stuff. And so we've spent these last 6 months plus learning the songs and recording them. So we haven't released them yet, but in the next year or so, they should be out for people to hear.
We'll certainly make sure
Emily,
to share that.
I'm so excited that you're exploring pitch. It's one of my favorite topics. And
cool.
About it, when I was in the pyramid, I tuned up to 440 with my tuner on my violin, but within 15-20 minutes, the violin went down to 432, and it just kept doing it. The acoustics, it kept making it go to 432. So I wound up singing at 440, and the violin was at 442. So sometimes you get those beats and stuff.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah, it's really fascinating stuff. Yeah.
And I'm sure I'm sure it's just like almost like completely retraining your ear in your brain. I mean, mathematically speaking, it's kind of, and correct me if I'm wrong, kind of like we learn 1 + 1 = 2, and then what if you really broke that down? I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah, it is.
I went to put my piano at 432, my upright, for a year, because that's where Brahms had kind of settled on the 432 pitch, and 415 was the tuning, which is today's G sharp, in much of the Baroque time. So I didn't want to go down that far, but I did go 432 on one of my pianos to see what that was like, and see what these things would sound like.
And Emmalee,
it's you just relax into it. You just say, okay, I'm going to accept this, and just breathe and relax in and play it, and don't think about pitch, but just think about the feelings that you get when you're playing the Brahms or the romantic pieces. Or if you have one of those carbon fiber violins, I've got one of those, and I can tune that down to 415 and then play the Baroque, and they sound great on it. It's not so easy on a wood instrument, because the bridges and everything is made so that it's going to go for 440 today. But those the carbon fiber ones, I've done that before. I played all the Baroque things at 415A. It's a trip.
Oh wow! Yeah, that actually that came up in last week's talk. When we were talking with the wind section, there was with some of the players from there. We got into this whole conversation about different tunings and the way that they have to adjust, and it's just crazy to me. I'm a pianist, so we don't. It's a little different. That's always good to hear. And as we look forward to the day that the Asheville Symphony and symphonies in general and musicians all get to come back together to play, we've got our favorite question always, but it's a little different this week just because of the nature of the topic. And John Condren beat me to it. He asked, what different genres of music would you like to see the Asheville Symphony engage in? You can look at the question and answer to see some of the suggestions he wrote, but I'm just going to throw it out there. Maybe we'll even hear some genres that our viewers have never even heard before. So Who's gonna go? What
Well,
comes
for
to
sure,
mind?
the John Cage, John Cage 432.
Mm.
We all know that piece is silence, right?
Well, you
Oh,
know,
but it's
Yeah.
not.
it's a perfect pandemic thing, you know. You just go inside and you just feel and be aware of your surroundings in a way you've never been done. I think that would be a great opening piece for the first time we come back together.
Yeah, would be hilarious.
Be very funny. You get to hear all the air handling intricacies.
Would be relevant though. I mean, John Cage was here at one time. Was in Black Mountain, and
That's right.
that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, what happened with that is that there was a woman in New York who was doing a movie about John Cage, and someone had given her my album, and that's how Kay Larson came into my life, and she actually gave me the best reviews. She said it's her favorite CD album, and you know, to listen to in the car on her long car rides, you know, back from home, back and forth to New York when she was working on the John Cage.
Oh wow.
Mm.
All right, you got to give us some genres. I'm going to pick on you, Emmalee, because I'm taking notes during this, and Darko is as well during the ASO at home to give ideas for the future. Definitely taking note.
Absolutely.
Will, what are your thoughts?
I I really don't know. There's so much good music,
Right.
and there's so much good music in so many different genres. Um, and it's interesting sometimes to bring them together, but it's also nice just to hear them. I mean, people still like to hear the Eroica Symphony, even though it's been played a lot and it's been recorded a lot, but it's still good music. On the other hand, there's other things that are being done that need a hearing. We need to have our uh, our ears expanded, our experience expanded by how by hearing some ways in which these different instrumental traditions or choral traditions might come together. So I don't know that I could select any one thing. I guess my hope is that there's just going to be more excitement to hear live music of any type when we're actually able to make it again, and that people will get together to support the musicians who are making it, but also to make music themselves. I think we've professionalized music so much in this country that it seems like it's okay if someone says, "Well, I'm not musical." But in most parts of the world, if you said you weren't musical, they'd look at you like you were crazy, like you said you didn't need to eat or you didn't need to sleep or something.
Right.
And for us, in many ways, many people's experiences with music is listening to it on the radio. I think people need to perform, and it's something that anybody can do. We need to get away from the idea that musical performance is only, or the musical ability is only the result of a gift. There's a lot of hard work involved for all of us. We weren't born playing bassoon or violin or cello. We had to learn it and practice it because we did it because we loved the experience of just working on it. And that, I think, can be available to anybody. They just have to find the right spot. And I hope that people get excited about making music of any kind when we can finally get together and do it together.
That's some really thought-provoking things you just said, Will, and I think some very inspiring thoughts. And I am right there with you, along with everybody else on this panel. I'm sure that we're hopeful, and I think that day will come. And I think that this time has caused many people to pick up paintbrushes or pick up an instrument they never thought that they would have time to touch. And I hope that does continue after all of this. And I never thought about it until you just said it about the professionalism of music in this country. That is a very true statement. Well, it's 8 o'clock. It's a little over 8 o'clock, and I think that's a wonderful note to end on. No pun intended. Does anybody have anything else that they'd like to add before we say goodbye to everyone? Anything at all? No, we're good. Well, I just want to thank everybody that joined this evening to watch on this cold, freezing December 1st. And I want to thank all the panelists for taking the time to sit down and stay with me and speak with you all. And hope you all enjoyed it as much as we did and the viewers did. And in the meantime, please feel free to share with us anything that you all are doing that you'd like for us to share with our audience and our supporters. I know that they would be delighted to hear music and albums and anything that you all are working on. So with that, I'll say good night and thank you again.
Thank you. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you so much, everyone.